If you were a kid of the 2000s like I was, then you'll remember that Lilo and Stitch had an amazingly smart advertising campaign. They would show some of the most iconic scenes from our favourite Disney movies, and Stitch would ruin them. He crashed his way into Beauty and the Beast.
I'll be in my room. Get your own movie.
The Little Mermaid. And my personal favourite, The Lion King.
Hey, that's not Simba.
The strangest one was Aladdin, because whereas everyone else was deterred by Stitch, just look at what Jasmine does here.
Oh, Bobby. Oh, Bobby. Hey! You get your own movie.
It's the car, right? Chicks love the car.
Either Batman Forever was right, or Jasmine has a thing for blue. If it's the latter, then you better keep that genie in the lamp there, Al.
Oh my god, she's a complete slut.
But these adverts were an amazing marketing strategy from Disney, and it worked, because Lilo and Stitch was a huge success at the box office, had a 65-episode TV show, as well as 3 straight-to-video movies, and now it has a live-action remake, whose advertising campaign was nowhere near as creative.
Sorry folks, there's a breaking development. There's something down on the field.
I see that too. What is that?
That guy's got no chance.
Loser.
Alrighty.
And like all Disney remakes on this channel, if it can score even 1 point against the original in this versus battle, I will give it a pass and let Disney walk away with some dignity. Can it win 1 point against the original? We are about to find out. Let the... hey!
Let the battle commence.
Stupid Stitch stealing my catchphrase. He's lucky I'm not trashing this movie. Lilo and Stitch starts with Stitch's introduction and his creator Jumba being on trial for creating a new life form. The two get locked up, but using his super intelligence, Stitch outsmarts the ship's security and shuts down his power. He then hijacks a red ship, gets involved in a space battle, and then goes into hyperspace with his destination being Earth, or as the aliens call it,
Yarth.
The intelligent aliens send his creator Jumba and an Earth expert Pleakley to capture him. Whilst on Earth, he gets adopted as a dog by Lilo, and then the story becomes about a struggling family, as well as a story about self-discovery as Stitch wishes for a family. All the whilst he's being pursued by the aliens. And the story for the remake is everything I just said about the original, except they immediately start taking things out. The first thing they take out is Stitch's build-up. You see, in the animated movie, he's being built up by the Alien Council here, and then we see him for the first time. But in the live-action movie, they remove his build-up and just show him in the jar just like that. And bear in mind, the movie had just started at this point, and taking out Stitch's introduction made it feel incredibly rushed. They also rushed the scene where he works the security weapons. In the animated movie, you see exactly how Stitch comes to the realization that he can use them to his advantage. This not only showcases his super intelligence, but it leads to a really funny and badass action sequence, which also showcases his super strength and agility. In the remake, however, they cut all of this out. I am not exaggerating here. In fact, I'm going to recreate the remake's version of this scene with clips from the original film and show you just how fast they rush through this great action-packed opening.
Where is he? He's taken a police cruiser.
He took the red one.
Yep, they completely cut out Stitch figuring out the weakness in their security systems, he doesn't spit the first time learning that the weapons will actually fire, and they skip the action scene of him breaking out of the ship and disabling its power, and on top of that, they also skip his space battle. So from the very first scene, the remake was rushing through the original movie with such speed that I was genuinely surprised that this movie was longer than the original, because at this rate, the movie will be over in like 20 minutes. But then we get to the scenes on Earth with Lilo and Nani, and just you wait till the next segment when we discuss how this movie handles their scenes. But in terms of the story, this part of the animated movie was done so well, and the transition from this action-packed sci-fi movie in the opening to the more grounded human story between two sisters in the rest of the film was done so seamlessly. But that's not the case in the remake, as sadly, it just continues to rush through the original story. Now you might think I'm crazy for saying this, but I'm not exaggerating when I say that this movie has the worst pacing and editing out of all of Disney's live action remakes. And this never fails to amaze me, because you'd think that if anyone was going to rush these scenes, then it would be the creators behind the animated movies, as they have a very limited hour and 20-minute runtime. But no, the live action movies, which can go up to 2 hours if they wanted to, are somehow the ones that are rushing through the narrative. And this narrative has already been proven to perfectly fit an hour and 20-minute movie, so why do they feel the need to rush when they have so much time on their hands? Whilst the plot and subplots were given the perfect amount of time in the animated film and were given a perfect amount of focus, in the remake they were all rushed. And I can only assume that maybe it was a budgetary reason, so they didn't want to do the whole space action sequence because they couldn't afford it. Because, for those of you that don't know, this movie was originally intended to be a straight Disney Plus film, so they kept the budget very limited, although I think with $100 million they could have done more than what they ended up doing. That's also why they couldn't afford Captain Gun 2. Now, even if I don't like it, I can understand why they can't afford those with their budget, but what's their excuse once they get to Earth, and the aliens are not in the equation? Why do those scenes feel so rushed too? Again, we'll talk about these in more detail in the characters segment. Additionally, the animated movie had plenty of great humor in the film, jokes which to this day are still hilarious.
Oh good, my dog found the chainsaw.
Lilo, don't hang!
The humor in the remake was just very generic and cringy modern day humor. The new jokes aren't written well, and even jokes that they redo from the original film just feel passionless here. So the tone in the remake is all over the place and doesn't work. The biggest problem that the story for this movie faces is the pacing. It is on fast forward to such a degree that the emotional elements of the original film are not able to sit with you or the characters. The movie also picks and chooses which scenes it wants to take from the original story and which scenes it wants to leave out. And boy, it leaves out some of the most memorable and iconic parts of the original film. And the story was already half-assed and really bad as it was, but these exclusions really hurt it in a way that it couldn't bounce back. All the story elements in the animated movie were incorporated with such love and care, and the way it was able to jump between these different tones was expertly done. Everything came together like a perfect jigsaw puzzle, but in the remake, it felt like they took the jigsaw puzzle apart, threw a few pieces away, added pieces from another puzzle, shaved the edges off of other pieces, and then tried to put it all together. And the result is a gigantic mess with pieces that don't go together and others that are just missing. Everything connects in the story for the original movie, but in the remake, everything feels disjointed. So the movie with superior story is the animated Lilo and Stitch. But before we continue, if you're enjoying this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button and the bell right next to it so you can stay up to date with all my future Versus videos. Now maybe it's because I'm older, but when watching this movie again after all these years, Lilo really bothered me. She starts fights at school over tiny things. Rather than stay at school and wait for her sister, she comes home and locks all the doors with nails, even though the social worker is on his way any second now. And if things don't go well here, then she will be taken away by Child Protective Services. When I was a kid, I never quite understood how serious this whole situation was, and I just laughed at it. But now, 23 years later, I was mad at her. And I felt really bad for Nani, who is really trying throughout this movie. Watching the scene again, I think Lilo deliberately was acting out in front of the social worker. Because as soon as he's gone, she does this one thing that tipped me off that she knew. Now this scene is so hilarious. In fact, I remember as a kid, my parents were laughing louder at this than me and my siblings were. But as you can tell, Lilo is a right little brat.
Why didn't you wait at the school? You were supposed to wait there!
At the same time though, I understand it, because Lilo lost her parents. They sadly died in a car crash, and now her and her sister are alone, and Lilo, being as young as she is, this is a very hard and traumatic thing to go through, and understandably, she is acting out. And the movie very smartly and subtly shows you that she is going through grief and depression and even loneliness. So there is a lot going on with the emotional state of this character, far more than I gave this movie credit for when I was a kid. In the live action movie, however, it feels less like she is acting out because she is grieving from the death of her parents, and more like she is just being a mischievous kid. The thick layer of tragedy that is at the core of this mischief in the original movie is majorly pushed to the background in the remake. And although they say their parents died, you don't really feel the emotional effects of it like you do in the animated movie, and it makes the arguments between Nani and Lilo feel weightless. But don't worry, the acting and editing makes it feel weightless too, as their arguments in this movie feel like a performance from a school play. Now this is very important, because although we are laughing at the scene in the animated movie, as soon as the chase was over, the conversation became very real. Lilo continues to act out, Nani is fed up with her, and the two yell at each other. But the movie masterfully manages to make this very real argument feel funny as well. As with many arguments, they can get pretty petty.
Cause it's stinky like you! Go to your room! I'm already in my room!
The animated movie makes the arguments feel like they are coming from two real sisters, and this directly leads into a very nice scene between the two after they've cooled down, and it's so genuine and nice. But in the remake, this is all rushed. They try to slow the pacing down when the two talk after the argument, but without the appropriate amount of time given to the previous scene, the emotional conversation between the two just doesn't work. It's very easy to forget, but this is the first time we see Lilo and Nani on screen together. For all intents and purposes, this is their introduction scene, but it feels like they have been sisters for years, so it doesn't feel like this is the first time you're seeing them together. But in the remake, their failure to properly execute their introduction and give it the time that it needs really hurt their sisterly bond in the next scene and the rest of the scenes throughout the film, and the poor acting didn't help either. Now I said that Lilo was irritating, but then her sister would do something irritating as well.
Oh no! Gravity is increasing on me!
No, it's not!
It is too, Lilo. The same thing happened yesterday.
You rotten sister, your butt is crushing me! Why do you act so weird?
And it's at this moment when I was like, yeah, these two are definitely sisters.
You're crazy.
Hey! Watch where you're going! Stupid head!
Oh yeah, they are definitely sisters. Also in the live action movie, Lilo does not get into trouble for beating her classmate like she did in the animated film. Instead, they play it very safe and she just pushes her instead. And this is one of many examples of how the animated film from 23 years ago had more of an edge to it, and it spoke a lot to Lilo's emotional state. And it felt like something a kid would do, but the remake completely erases that in exchange for a more safe, family-friendly approach, which is exactly what you would expect from Disney in 2025. Also, in the animated movie, Nani was juggling work and looking after Lilo, but she still had a lot of character and personality to her. And seeing how the two sisters argue, and then they have quiet moments where Lilo says that she prefers her as a sister than a mum, and how Nani answers Lilo's wish and gets her a dog.
Oh yes, all of our dogs are adoptable. Except that one!
Or what she thinks to be a dog, all speaks towards character and how she treats her little sister. And this shows the close relationship they have and how heartbreaking it will be if Lilo gets taken away. But in the remake, all that character is ripped away. There are fractured pieces of that original character in here, but honestly, this Nani is just boring. She does one of two things throughout this entire movie. She is either incredibly moody, or she's always job hunting. And if she's not doing that, then she'll complain about job hunting. All those sisterly interactions, those quiet moments, they're not here. I mean, they'll try to drop scenes like this on us, but it doesn't feel earned in the remake, whereas it did in the original. And most unforgivable of all, Nani never took it upon herself to answer Lilo's wish with a dog.
What?
In the remake, they have the neighbor get her a dog, and this is where it's unforgivable. When Nani finds out, she is incredibly moody, and even mad when they come back home. This change really was ridiculous, because it's one of the big moments where it shows Nani doing something really nice for her little sister. Something that this version of the character really needed, and they took that from her in the remake, and gave it to a new side character that they created for this film.
See, now that's some bullshit.
Now Lilo can be a pain, but she is a very cutely drawn character, and I thought they did a pretty good job with casting Maya Kealoha, because they were able to bring that cuteness over to the live action version, and she has a lot of round facial features too, like animated Lilo did, so I think she was well cast, but sadly, they didn't direct her well. If she was directed well, and Disney did not take over directing duties like they usually do with these live action remakes, then I have no doubt she could have done a much better job, but that is not what we ended up with. And Nani, They just needed to go back to the drawing room with this character, even with the casting, because nothing about her worked. A lot of thought went into these two characters in the animated movie, and watching it again after all these years, I never truly appreciated just how much thought went into them. But now, with an adult mindset, I have, and hats off to it. So the movie with the unabashedly superior Lilo and Nani is the original movie. Now, the beginning of the movie shows us that Stitch is a super intelligent creature whose sole purpose is to destroy, and that slowly changes as he meets Lilo. And as well as giving him all this hilarious comedy, there is actually a lot of emotional depth that they do with his character too. Things that I didn't notice when I was a kid. For example, the ugly duckling story. When I was a kid, I thought he just related to the story. But no, it's so much sadder when you realize that he's hoping his family will come for him if he says the words like the duck did. But they never do. Well, not in the way he envisioned. And this adds a huge layer of tragedy and sadness to Stitch, and it humanizes him. My only criticism is that I wish they would have spent more time with his emotional subplot, because there comes a point in the movie when Lilo says,
"What happened to yours? I hear you cry at night. Do you dream about them?"
And I would have liked to have seen that explored. What are Stitch's nightmares like? I feel like there could have been a whole extra layer to him there, and they didn't need to focus on it for long, just about 5 minutes or so would have done. But with that said, what they did do is still really strong. And this goes to how layered of a character he is. He's funny, he's destructive, he's tragic, and he also becomes incredibly loyal. And using the frog, they perfectly illustrated how he has changed over the course of the movie. There's a reason that Stitch has become such a popular character to many. He ticks every box, and they really bring it home by giving him a wonderfully written emotional arc. And then we get live action Stitch. And sadly, this movie just proves that Disney do not understand what made their classic characters so popular. This is hardly news, but it was especially noticeable in this movie. For starters, they don't illustrate Stitch's abilities in the opening action scene because they cut it out, and worst of all, they give him all the mischievous comedy, but they don't give him the heart. The iconic ugly duckling scene for Stitch that we just spoke about, they completely cut it out of the movie.
What?
That is criminal. The animated Stitch was given so much layers to his character. Underneath all of that mischief was a very sad and lonely individual. And they took that out because clearly that is not what mattered to Disney. They don't care about what makes Stitch a layered and complex character as much as they care about making him a toy to sell on shelves. So up the goofiness, up the jokes. In the animated movie, there was a transition to Stitch becoming more emotionally open. Whenever Stitch would see strong examples of family, he would stop his little rampage for a moment and notice. Now in the remake, they gave him a scene where he saves Lilo from drowning, and I thought this scene was okay, but without all of that great development beforehand, it just came across very flat. The only reason you really care when you see this is because Stitch is a recognizable character and you don't want to see that beloved character drown. That is ultimately what is driving your emotional attachment to this character, and the animated movie made him those things, and the remake does not. I actually thought there would be more to say in this segment, but there really isn't. Stitch was a fully developed three-dimensional character in the animated movie, and ironically, the movie where he actually is three-dimensional is where he ended up being the most flat. So the movie with superior Stitch is the animated movie. In the animated movie, we had Cobra Bubbles, a social worker whose sole purpose is to monitor Nani and see if she is a suitable guardian for her sister. And he is super serious and very imposing. So as well as the movie being funny, charming, and heartfelt, this storyline gave it a real sense of urgency too. And that's not even counting the alien stuff. In the remake, however, Cobra Bubbles is played much more as the goofy comic relief. In the remake, he is not a social worker, this woman is. And instead, Bubbles is a CIA agent who is investigating alien activity, and then to get closer to Stitch, he decides to pose as a social worker. So now we have two social workers in this movie. And like I said, he's played up much more for laughs rather than being serious like he was in the original. And that is one of the many things that compromises the tone of the movie and makes it feel more like a parody copy of the animated version. And the main social worker we get for most of the film is a different character who is played by Tia Carrere, who voiced Nani in the original movie, and she is nowhere near the presence of Bubbles. With Bubbles, he was very strict and demanding, but at the same time, he wasn't evil or relishing in this family's predicament. He genuinely felt bad about this whole situation, and it made him feel like a very real character. This is especially commendable because Disney could have so easily turned him into a generic villain, but they didn't. They abstained from it, and it really made him memorable. In the remake, however, he just feels like a comedy cliche. Also, they took out Captain Guntu from the movie because they couldn't afford him, and replaced him with Jumba, who is now the villain of the story. And no, it does not work. They hired Zach Galifianakis to play the role, and this has to be one of the worst cases of casting I have ever seen in my life. Gone is the Russian accent, the fun personality, the really funny comedy, and in comes a much more high-pitched voice that sounds nothing like Jumba from the original.
Wait, it's moving. Come on, let's go, we gotta go.
And to make things worse, he is mostly in a human disguise so Disney can save money on effects. And his turn into the villain made no sense, and his whole personality is too jokey. He never once felt like the Jumba from the animated film. Now, I don't mind these remakes making changes, but the changes have to make sense. And they have to make the movie better, not worse. And if Jumba wasn't bad enough, they also did Pleakley dirty. Pleakley was just overly happy about everything here. In the animated movie, he was always terrified when the councilwoman would call them for an update. But here, he always puts on a big, exaggerated, dumbass smile, and I could not stand Billy Magnuson's performance. I found him to be the most annoying character in this movie. And this really is a shame because Jumba and Pleakley were very effective comic relief in the original movie, and they felt like characters whose butts were on the line if they screwed up. And they acted like it too. But in the remake, you wouldn't know their butts were on the line, mainly because Pleakley is too stupid to realize it. The movie just focuses on giving them terrible slapstick, and not only are they not funny, but you could cut them out of 95% of the film and it would make no difference. And these two resemble nothing of their original source material. And just like the rest of Disney's live-action remakes, the actors are all just blurting out the dialogue with none of the emotions that they had in the original movie. Like when the councilwoman reacts after Stitch says something to her which is so despicable.
Naughty!
Now you can hear the disgust in her voice, but in the remake, it sounds like she's just blurting it out with none of the emotions or disgust as her animated character did. And all of the lines they are repeating from the animated movie are spoken like this. And it's just completely off base and inferior to how they were said in the original. And then we have David. Now David was never a big character, but I always remembered him. He would try to score with Nani, but he also seemed like a genuinely nice guy. But in the remake, they make him seem like such a moron. At one point, his grandmother comedically tells him to stop talking when he tries to ask Nani out. And that wasn't needed, and again, feeds into the generic dialogue and cringy humor that this movie has. Very 2025 style humor. I could make a whole essay as to how bad the side characters and aliens are in this film, but I think the point has been made. These were all wonderful side characters in the original movie, and they have been completely butchered in the remake, to the point that I can't even recognize them. So the movie with the far superior side characters is the original movie. Look, when you get down to it, this is just another disrespectful live-action remake. Cobra Bubbles didn't even need to be in this movie, Pleakley didn't need to be in this movie, Jumba didn't even need to be in the film either, except for the beginning and climax. The whole middle section with him and Pleakley was just a load of cringy nonsense and could have been cut. Scenes that were originally funny are now rushed, cringeworthy, sloppily thrown together, and don't have the impact that they were meant to. This argument between the two sisters is both hilarious and feels so real, but in the remake, it feels like a school play, was rushed, and the entire time they had comedic music playing over it. The changes the remake makes to the story, and especially the characters, is a downright betrayal of the original. And there are so many other things I could have brought up, such as the terrible ending which has received a huge backlash from fans. But are you really surprised at this point? It's clear that Disney have no love for Lilo and Stitch and don't even understand what made it so good in the first place. The original movie is a beloved classic, and to this day has left a huge impact on audiences. Now, I had a couple problems with the original movie. I never understood how Nani and David could see Stitch here but couldn't see Jumba and Pleakley. Jumba agreeing to help Stitch save Lilo felt like a sudden convenient turn and made no sense. And like I said, watching the movie again after all these years, I did wish that we could have learned more about Stitch's nightmares. But aside from that, I have no other complaints. I loved this movie as a kid, and in some ways, it has only gotten better now that I'm an adult. And I was surprised to find when rewatching it that the music was composed by Alan Silvestri. He did the music for Back to the Future, Predator 1 and 2, as well as most of the Avengers movies. And when you get to the action sequences, the music sounds a lot like the music in Avengers Infinity War. You can listen to it in isolation in the credits. I guess this music is just Silvestri's style that he has been using for a couple decades now. In the remake, however, aside from the opening song, they don't really use any of the music from the original film, which is a shame because the score for the remake is so forgettable that I didn't even notice when it was on. Due to my minor complaints, the animated Lilo and Stitch was little and a tiny bit broken, just a tiny bit. This remake was little and broken, full stop. The budget was tiny, the pacing was rushed, the story was butchered, the Ohana concept was changed for some poorly written forced drama, and the ending of the movie was absolute garbage. And Nani explaining her doubt of Ohana to Lilo, I get what they were trying to do, but it just felt so phony. Her parents didn't leave them behind, they were involved in a car crash. That was completely out of their control. So to say that they left us behind is just forced drama, it really is. And it especially does not tie in with the ending. In the original, the girls were alone and had no one, only each other. But in this movie, they have a neighbor who is like family to them, and Nani is perfectly okay with just leaving her to care for Lilo while she leaves the country. And that takes away the loneliness and family stakes that the animated film perfectly set up between these two. And Stitch's mischief in general is not as charming or funny as it was in the original. His amazing character arc has been stripped away, and his voice just comes across as more noisy in this version.
Stay.
And it only gets noisier when you combine that with the fast-paced editing. And to top it all off, the movie has a ton of blatantly obvious ADR. Yeah, this is a complete clusterfuck. And this is another one of those Disney remakes where it was so bad that I was actually getting angry whilst I was watching it. It's time for the scores. The animated Lilo and Stitch gets a 9 out of 10, and the remake gets a 2. It's sad to see that another lifeless Disney remake has reached near $1 billion at the box office. If the live-action Snow White was giving us hope that Disney would stop, the live-action Lilo and Stitch has fired them up and given them enough motivation to keep making more. Case in point, it's official. The Lilo and Stitch live-action remake is getting a sequel. But that'll most likely be about 2 years away. And at least we have no more live-action remakes until then, right? Oh. We'll see you next time. A huge thanks to my patrons who, as always, really help support the channel. If anyone else wants to support the channel via my Patreon, then I'll really appreciate that, and you will get tons of perks, including gaining access to my private Discord server. Now tell me, what did you guys think of the Lilo and Stitch remake? Did you find it as bad as I did? Or were you able to find some stuff to enjoy in it? Be sure to let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching, everyone, and I will catch all of you very soon. Take care.